Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. Today we're going to be talking about the British battleship HMS Hood. This is part of a series of videos we've been making where we compare other countries' battleships and other battleships in general to our own Battleship New Jersey and seeing how they stack up. 2 weeks ago, we looked at the battleship Yamato, the largest battleship ever built. Now, she compared to New Jersey, who was the second largest class of battleships ever built. Last week, we looked at the German battleship Bismarck, which was the largest battleship to ever come out of Europe and the third heaviest class ever built. And today, we're looking at Hood, which was the heaviest battleship to ever come out of Great Britain. So, we are going to compare HMS Hood to Iowa and New Jersey a little bit, but we're also going to compare her to Bismarck because the fates of those two ships are, of course, very closely related. So Hood was commissioned on May 15th, 1920, and that makes her the oldest ship we've looked at so far. She's 23 years older than New Jersey. However, believe it or not, her design greatly influenced the battleship New Jersey. Hood is often referred to as a battle cruiser. The British referred to any ships that were faster than a traditional battleship as a battle cruiser, regardless of the level of their armor protection. In reality, battle cruisers always have one less barrel per gun or one less turret than battleships built at the same time, and they have lighter armor. Hood's armor and armament are both comparable to the most recent British battleships of the R class. The only major difference is she was stretched extra long to add additional propulsion in the middle. So to me, that makes her a fast battleship. Her armor protection is of battleship levels. Her firepower is battleship level. It makes her the first fast battleships, with the possible exception of the earlier British Queen Elizabeth class, which were designed to make 25 knots in an era when battle lines made about 21 knots, and when battle cruisers tend to make 28 to 30 knots. So really they were somewhere in the middle as designed, and as built, they rarely got over 23 knots. So they were faster than the rest of the battle line, but I would not say that they were true fast battleships. So HMS Hood is the first fast battleship. Her designer actually goes over to the United States during World War I and helps the United States design their first battle cruisers of the Lexington class. And the design of those ships influences the design of Iowa-class battleships. So the Iowas are definitely fast battleships. New Jersey is the fastest battleship ever built. Hood comes in at 32 knots, while New Jersey was designed for 33 knots. And the other major thing is the armored belt. Hood's armored belt is angled, which gives it a greater equivalent thickness. And this was used with South Dakota and Iowa-class battleships for the same purpose, as it was with the Lexington-class battle cruisers, which were never completed as battle cruisers, they were completed as aircraft carriers. So, normally at the end of the video, I would compare this ship to New Jersey. Could it win in a fight? That's no question. New Jersey wins that fight 10 times out of 10. Hood is nearly 25 years older. She, even in 1941, in the peak of her career, she had some early electronics, but it wasn't very effective. Her guns are the very good British 15-inch Mark I guns, but they still don't compare to New Jersey's 16-inch 50 caliber guns in range or penetrating power. Her armor belt is equivalent to New Jersey's in many ways, but her deck armor is very good by World War I standards, where they weren't really planning on fighting long-range engagements, but she can't compete with New Jersey's more modern deck armor scheme. So New Jersey's slightly faster. She can choose the range of the engagement and use her superior firepower and electronics to just rain shots on Hood until she is sunk. What I would like to do is compare Hood with Bismarck. The two ships fought famously, with Hood famously blowing up with the loss of most of her crew, everyone but 3 sailors. People often point to that and say that it's because she's a battle cruiser, she was never meant to do that. Really, Hood and Bismarck are remarkably similar in size, in firepower, and equipment. The only major difference is Hood is 20 years older. Bismarck was built almost exactly 20 years later. Bismarck's armor scheme, as we talked about last video, is more based off of World War I design ships than modern armor schemes like we see on ships like Yamato or New Jersey. So really, their armor is fairly comparative. And we're going to put those numbers up on the screen here so you can see them. You'll see how similar they are. Each ship has 8 15-inch guns, 2 twin turrets forward, 2 twin turrets aft. The two ships are a little over 800 feet long. Hood is slightly longer at 860 foot 7 inches. She's still 27 feet shorter than an Iowa-class battleship, but very long, narrow profile, great for cutting through the water. Bismarck is slightly shorter, a little bit wider, makes her a better gunnery platform. In terms of secondary battery, Hood was designed originally with 5.5-inch guns, which would have been inside the superstructure here. Those were removed during the interwar period and replaced with these 4-inch anti-aircraft guns. Bismarck had similar 6-inch guns as her secondary battery and 4.1-inch guns as her anti-aircraft guns, so very similar there. Hood had some light anti-aircraft guns and some unrotated projectile launchers added to her shortly before she was lost. Hood's slightly faster at 32 knots, and Bismarck around 30 or 31 knots. Both ships are similar in displacement. Hood is 46,000 tons fully loaded. Bismarck's closer to 51,000 tons fully loaded. For armor, Hood's belt is 12 inches thick. Bismarck's is 12.6 inches thick. They both have the similar scheme where they have their belt armor on the outside, and then they've got sloped deck armor inside of that. So a projectile has to pass both through the belt armor. Hood's is angled, Bismarck's is not. So it's got greater equivalent thickness, and then through the deck armor to get to any of the vitals. Hood had more of her important equipment protected by armor, such as internal communications. Bismarck famously did not have internal communications in the armored part of the ship. Deck armor is where the major difference is. Hood's was about 3 inches thick at the maximum. Some new armor plate had been added on, but as you can see from the amount of the hull that is red versus gray, Hood sat very, very low in the water. Following the loss of British battlecruisers at Jutland, more and more armor plate was added to her design, and she came up being much lower in the water than initially planned. So she was a very wet ship, and they were never able to add as much armor as she needed. Bismarck's deck armor is about 5 inches thick, so more modern. They actually took armor off of the side armor from earlier World War I era battleships and put it on the deck. So Bismarck does have a more modern armor scheme to face plunging shots than Hood. Hood is very much a product of World War I, and so she suffers accordingly. So, in theory, with the exception of there being exactly 20 years between when this ship was commissioned and when this one was commissioned, they're very equal. Both ships have early electronics on board. Both ships went into battle with an admiral and their staff on board. The main difference at the Battle of the Denmark Strait, Hood started the war with a very proud, very well-trained crew. As new ships were commissioned, the crew was taken off to form the nucleus of more modern ships. So by the time of the Battle of the Denmark Strait, Hood had a lot of new sailors on board, and they had trained in a lot of stuff and participated in a lot of actions, but not any ship-on-ship combat. Bismarck spent a year and a half training in the Baltic, doing anti-ship combat, and many sources say that they trained specifically to fight Hood, the pride of the Royal Navy. So Bismarck's crew, even though they were mostly new sailors as well, had spent a lot of time training for ship-to-ship fighting, where Hood's crew had not. Also, Bismarck, brand new, fresh out of the yard, Hood famously needed yard work in a serious way. One of the other British battle cruisers had a major upgrade, HMS Renown, and a similar one was planned for Hood, but because she was the premier ship in the Royal Navy, and because for years leading up to World War II there had been either financial shortfalls or major world events like the Spanish Civil War, where Hood was deployed, the lead up to World War II, where Hood spent a lot of time deployed, they were never willing to withdraw her from frontline service for a year or 2 years to give her the major upgrades she needed. So Hood was very much a 1920s ship going into combat with an untrained crew against a very well-trained crew on a brand new ship that was more or less of a World War I design. On May 23rd, 1941, Hood was hit by a number of rounds from the German heavy cruiser Prinz Eugen that set off small magazines and the boats on the boat deck here, causing a fire. She was also hit by explosions on the main fire control tower there. Because Bismarck and her escorting cruiser Prinz Eugen looked so similar, Hood was firing at the wrong ship for part of the engagement. Everybody knows what the mighty Hood looks like, so Bismarck's excellent fire control team was aiming at her for the entire engagement. Within a couple of minutes and about 8 or 10 salvos, Bismarck's fire control team was able to find the range and land hits on Hood. And Admiral Holland had anticipated his approach on Bismarck. He wanted to bring his ships out, Hood and Prince of Wales, out to cross the German T so he could fire all of his guns while the Germans could only fire his forward guns. He didn't anticipate how fast they were going, and he ended up coming out with the Germans crossing his T. He was trying to get within range that German shells would be hitting his belt armor instead of his deck armor. And just when Hood got to that range and started to turn to open up the firing arcs for her after turrets, a German shell punched through her armored deck, set off her magazines, and caused the ship to explode with massive loss of life. If Hood's fire control team had been better, they could very easily have scored a similar hit on Bismarck, and Bismarck would have met the same fate. As it turned out, Bismarck only ever ended up engaging ships at close range, where her very thick belt and deck armor was able to eat tons of shots before being sunk. So, Hood, a very good ship, ahead of her time ship, which would help influence the Iowa-class battleships, but too old to effectively fight Bismarck in her condition. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments. If you would like to support us creating future content, be sure to check the description down below with links on how you can support the museum, our mission, and how we create content. And tune back in the future. I think our next video will be on the South Dakota class battleships, the class that came immediately before the New Jersey, and we'll see how those two classes differed. Unless anybody in the comments or questions leaves something else that they're interested in. See you next time.